Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion. And my name is Elsa. I'm from Taiwan NTHU Global Programme. And we're having Faf from Swedish University here to share their experiences with us. So Arnon, can you give us a brief introduction to Faf?
Yeah, thanks, Elsa. Welcome everyone on behalf of Lund as well here in Sweden. We're just trying to get some insights into the differences between the educational systems in Northern Europe and Taiwan. And together with the NTHU Global Programme, we hope that we can create some interesting discussion and get some insights into what everyone thinks of the differences in their respective educational systems.
Thanks, Arnon. So we're going to begin today's discussion. If you have any question, just type in the Slido part. We'll look into it later. So, wait, is this working? Okay. Oh, wait. So here's today's outline. We'll briefly introduce the education system in both Taiwan and in Northern Europe. And then we will begin to dig a little bit deeper to talk about the social phenomenon based on the two education systems. And then we'll have you guys typing up your question or what you thought about through the interactive session. And fourth, we'll divide it into breakout rooms to have first discuss on what you think of the issue. And then the fifth will be a comment sharing. And then lastly will be our closing. So here I'm going to tell you, I'm representing a typical Taiwanese student. So I'm telling you what is a daily life for a high school student in Taiwan. So in Taiwan, there's actually a private school and public school. So what I'm studying is actually a private school. So what you see on the screen right now is actually a day of my high school life. So I started classes in 7:30 in the morning and I leave school probably at 9 or more extent to be 11 at night. And so as you see, my time at school is quite long. So what exactly do I do? So whenever I went to school and I just have a self-study or a quiz, whatever subject the teacher is asking, we're doing the quiz. And I'll have five classes in the morning, 45 minutes per class, and then we'll have a 10 minutes break in between. And I only got a 30 minutes of lunch time, and then it also includes for cleaning the campus. So I have to finish lunch in probably 10 to 15 minutes. It's quite short, and I start to do the cleaning for the environment. And then a nap, and then the afternoon classes. I still have 4 classes in the afternoon, and then they're all very heavy subjects like Chinese, English, math, physics, chemistry, all the kind of subjects you can think. And then we'll have dinner at school and then a little bit break, and then we'll start the night self-study. So as you can see, my time at school is quite long, and I still need to go to school on Saturday. So I basically just don't have any time for my leisure activities, or I could go to cram school or something. Like the pressure at school is already heavy. I couldn't even afford another part. And here is, we barely have other like extracurricular activities. Basically, the teacher just focusing on helping you prepare for the exams or other thing. But of course, this is just a day in my school. But if other people would like to share your ideas, just let us know. We'll talk about that later. So next, we'll have Gavin to introduce his day in a public school.
Okay, thank you, Elsa. I'm Gavin from NTHU. So I'm going to talk about the public school's life. A large proportion of students go to public schools. Okay, as you can see, the morning and in the afternoon, the life is pretty similar to what Elsa mentioned. So we still have a lot of classes and afternoon class. However, you can see in the evening, students could have more choices here. But they usually choose to go to cram school or choose still self-studying at school or they simply just go home. So students have relatively more freedom than private school. However, you can see we still spend about 9.5 hours per day at school, which is still a lot. And not to mention, student will have to spend more time studying, preparing for their exams. Speaking of exams, we have 3 major exams each semester. So the pressure is quite severe since you have to study about once per 2 months because there are 3 exams each semester. Okay, so I'm going to talk about something more fun. We're going to talk about some extracurricular events. On the contrary to private school, we have more events in our public schools. For example, for clubs, or you can say societies, the school will allocate about 2 hours class every 2 weeks. And other than that, people can spend more time on attending it. So that depends on each student. Some students spend a lot of time, maybe every day going to the club. However, some of them never go to the club, so that depends from case to case. And let's talk about some festivals. We have several events, for example, like school anniversary or featured exams, such as musical events or drama events or sport events. I think that's the life in both public school and private school in Taiwan. So I'm gonna hand it to Arne to talk about in Northern European side. Arne?
Yes, thank you guys. All right. So for the Northern European high school day, I'm from Finland myself, even though I'm studying at the moment here in Sweden. So I will be presenting the Finnish high school day. But overall, there's some differences between the different Northern European countries and their education systems. But overall, they have similar values and are somewhat constructed the same way. So again, if there's some comments that people want to make about, for example, typically the Swedish style, feel free to interrupt me or add anything you want. But yeah, here's my schedule that I would have in high school. And this is just a normal kind of a range of times. We have, our system allows us to choose our own courses based on our interests, as long as you get enough basically to graduate. Overall, you need something like 75 courses for 3 years. But how do you kind of construct that is up to you, basically. So the earliest classes I could have started at 8:15. Classes last for 75 minutes, which are quite long, but how they're constructed is very free based on the teacher. So there could be, for example, 40 minutes of reading or quizzes or something, and then 30 minutes of doing exercises or something. So it's also a bit made into almost 2 different classes sometimes. Yeah, so how I would usually try to construct my schedule would be, I would not want to take the 5th class slot, for example. So I would prefer to end my school days at 2:30, which usually was possible for me, which is pretty nice for a high school student, I think. I had a lot of friends who were masters of constructing their schedules to fit their own kind of preferences. So in some cases, you could have weeks where you only have school from Monday to Thursday, for example, if you took the classes in that kind of way. So there's a lot of freedom that is given to the students themselves. Yeah, and so I will talk a little, does this work? Okay, here you go. So yeah, typically we go to school around 30 to 35 hours a week. What's very specific, I think, about the Nordic system, at least the Finnish system, is that we don't really have a lot of homework. So usually all the work that we do is done in class, and that's kind of a value question as well. So that, because at school the society can kind of guarantee that all the students have the similar resources at hand, because at home you don't know about these socioeconomic differences, if you have spaces to do homework, if you have time to do that. So usually it's attempted that all the work would be done at school instead of doing a lot of homework. Yeah, as I already talked to you about, the schedule is very dependent on the student itself and their interest. And then high school in Finland the year is divided into 8-week periods. So it's, and then we have exams at the end of them always. So the pace is quite fast in the courses. But at least personally, I never really found that it was that strenuous because of all the free time that we get. So usually we work hard during classes, but that allows us to have a lot of free time after classes, basically. And that, I think, is a very specific thing about the Nordic system, is we have a very specific kind of working time and then leisure time. And that also shows in the society itself as well, with working world, with shorter working days and big differences between leisure time and work time. And yeah, that's the Finnish, and to a degree as well, the Nordic education system. Yeah, so I had some points about the society and education as well. So in Finland, there is a lot of research into early education. So this would mean children from age 6 to age 10, for example. So Finland is actually quite famous for this research. So what they want to find out is what's the best way for children to learn, and what kind of environments they learn, what kind of division between play and learning, and how can you combine these things. So what kind of creates the best environment for children to learn. And the education system, much like the society, has this equality principle that it tries to at least set all the people on the same starting line. So this is why learning takes place at school, because there it can be guaranteed that people have the same resources, places to study, access to teachers, access to even computers and things like that. And this way the socioeconomic impacts of family income, where you live, things like that are minimized. And a lot of the learning and teaching is emphasized on critical thinking, problem-solving skills. So there's very little, for example, multiple answer tests. Most exams that we did were open-ended questions, so you could argue things. There wasn't necessarily one specific answer that you would either get a point or 0. So what we learn is kind of to argue our points, think critically, and work around if we don't know everything about a subject, for example. And this shows also in the kind of not that test-oriented way of education. So we would have exams, obviously, because there needs to be some metric of how you're doing. But for example, our classes weren't about cramming for tests. They were about how to learn the subjects and doing some exercises, but not just kind of learning about what to do in a test of a subject. And yeah, that's the kind of meeting point of the Nordic society and the education system. And now we'll talk about the similar impacts in Taiwan.
Yes, and I'm introducing myself first. I'm James from NTHU, and I'm talking about what's behind the education system nowadays. Next page. So, from the previous discussion, we just simply divided into two sides of the concept, like test-oriented and not test-oriented. And it is quite complex to dig into this. So we're just gonna talk about some of the most important social phenomena based on this. Next one. So what's behind? As the first example, I want to show that what's in our high school is like in Taiwanese high school, we have to specialize in the first year or second year. It's like we have to choose social science, science, or biology as our main focus. And before we choosing this, actually we have a poor cognition on this subject. We don't know why we should choose this. Most of us and how what do this job do after? So, and we have quite a little consult on this. So we have to we might be going to bigly affected by the social expectations. It's like we have to choose the higher pay or high status as our priority. And we're going to give interest a lower priority. And it is also going to affect a little bit on the stereotype. And some kind of this are boys are expected to do better on science subject and furthermore. Next page. So the goal of pursuing education is transferring to the prestigious social status. It's like when you're in a job interview, the interviewer going to ask where you're from or what was your school, and if you're going to a better school, it's mostly you should have the same ability or knowledge to do the job. It is kind of like an assurance to your working competence, and it's also kind of give the space to advantage to introduce. So it might going to be more easy to introduce by people to do a job that graduate from the same or similar school. So it means that when you go to a better school, it's highly related to a ticket to success. So next page, and I'm going to hand over to Arnold again.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go a bit deeper as well into the education society in Northern Europe and kind of why the education system is how it is. And so the Nordic society is very kind of non-hierarchical. So even in the working world, it's when for example, your bosses are very approachable. The hierarchical lines are very fuzzy in a way, and this shows in the education system as well. So we call our teachers by the first names. It's all very familiar. There's very little disciplinary action if you're being a nuisance at class, for example. This has some negative impacts, of course. So there's, there are people who, so this just doesn't work on, but overall, I found it quite enjoyable. I've had some experience with very hierarchical education systems as well, where I would have to kind of be extremely polite and think about how to talk to a professor, whereas here in the Nordics, I just send an email saying like, "Hi Martin, I have this question," which is very different to some other education systems. For example, in Singapore, it was very different. I already talked about the schoolwork, done mostly in school hours, and why this is, so the socioeconomic impacts and giving equal opportunities. Students are given a lot of responsibility, so you have the freedom to choose your own courses and specialize in the areas that interest you, but there also is the responsibility that if you don't choose the right courses, or even if you don't know what you want to specialize in, that's going to hurt you in the long run. As if you only choose courses that are at enjoyable times, that you create a nice schedule, that you don't have to do all of schoolwork, but they're not the right courses for you, then you're going to have trouble pursuing your interests from that point of view. And schools are kind of just this one part of young people's lives. So extracurricular activities are not, there's a question. So how parents influence your choice of courses in Finland, that's really dependent on your family and your parents. So for example, I had actually no pressure at all about what I would pursue. My parents rarely even knew what exact classes I was necessarily doing. They just trusted that I was doing what I was interested in, and that I would kind of run them through properly. But then it's very individual. Some parents might be very on top of everything and tell that their kids need to do maths, for example. But overall, I would say it's not very common for parents to dictate a student's schedule. Yeah, so extracurricular activities are not organized by the schools. So for example, myself, I did a lot of sports during my high school times, and this would be outside of school always. So in the evenings, for example, I didn't have that much time to study either. I had to travel to different places to do my activities and travel back. And so it was a very good system for me that there wasn't, for example, homework to do when I got home, because I knew that I could do all the work at school, and that really supported the way I did my activities outside of school as well. Yeah, and freedom is not only for students, but teachers as well. Teachers are very respected in Finland, at least, and Northern Europe as well. The society trusts that they have the right capabilities to teach students, and they can also organize their classes in the way that they find it interesting for students to study and for them to teach. And they also have their different strengths. So there is a lot of freedom for. You can take, for example, the same maths class in high school by two different teachers, and they could be quite different depending on which teacher you decide to choose. And this was also something that we had to know as students, is which teacher was the one that suited our ways of learning. Yeah, I think that was what I had to say about education and society. Then we'll move on.
I think, thanks Arne for sharing. I think you talk about a lot of like degree of freedom to choose different like curriculum or teachers. And some I want Elsa, there are some questions listed in the in which stage are we going to discuss about them?
We'll discuss then in the interactive section later. So can you move to the next page for me?
Sure.
And then next one. Okay, so as people already filled in the first multiple choice question, like what do you want to pursue through your education? And we'll discuss the percentage a little bit later. And then secondly, we were wanted to ask is, what do you think are the pros and cons of these social phenomenon or these educational system? So again, I'll share my screen a bit, and then you guys can fill in the second question and we can see the answers together.
You can share now.
Okay. Oh, wait, presented. The second one. So you guys can type in what's the pros and cons of these social phenomena. And meanwhile, if you have anything you wanted to add on based on our discussion, or do you have any question, we already have 5 questions in the Slido and we'll go through that later, but we'll give you like 3 minutes to type up your thinking on the pros and cons. And meanwhile, Arne, there are like many questions like we have for Swedish people or Finnish people. So would you care to help us like explain it a bit? Can you see my screen? I think you moved yourself.
Yeah, I think he can, but he just muted himself.
Yeah, Arne, you moved yourself. We couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, let me just see. So does Northern European cultures also have this kind of echo chamber effects on job interview? I think it's, there's less of it, but it might be stronger in some specific circles, for example. So there are a couple of business schools in Helsinki that, at least I have this perception that they kind of, they have this echo chamber. So they like to hire people from that specific school and, or like, yeah, alumni from that school feel like they always hire other alumni from that school. But I don't think it's a very strong cultural thing. It just happens in smaller circles. At least that's my perception. Let me see the second one. So teachers in Taiwan got tons of content to teach. How the education ministry in Northern Europe design the content to make sure it covers most things? So I don't exactly know the particularities, how it's designed, but basically there is a certain, usually how high school, for example, works is you have specific courses that teach a specific part of a subject. So for example, history, in all of high school, I think I had 6 courses in history, and each taught kind of either a specific time frame or a specific time and place kind of view.
So based on what you're saying is like, I only take like world history for a while, and then I just jump into like chemistry, that kind of thing, like a cross-field study in a broader way.
I mean, you can do that, yeah, but how I was trying to kind of make the point is that there is a specific kind of a range of what to teach, but within that range, the teachers are very free to test out different methods of teaching in their classes. But how the education ministry designs this, like what to teach, I don't exactly know. But whatever is given, then the teachers have the freedom within that framework to kind of design their own classes and ways to teach.
And also I have an add-on question based on this. I want to know, like, if like you said, there's like a certain range of courses that you can take. If I wanted to take a more advanced classes, do I have to study the basic one first, or like I just could skip the basic one into the more advanced classes?
So it depends a little bit on the subject, and also at what point you're in. So for example, I think it was the clearest in mathematics, where you had to go through a couple of courses before you could start choosing freely. So you had to go through like a basic point. And the same with languages, you could only basically take them in order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then other courses you could choose a bit more freely. So it's a bit dependent on the subject.
I see.
I have a further question. So in Finland, there is no like a standard guideline for teacher to follow. Just like Taiwanese, we have a 12-year, curriculum guideline for teacher to teach. Yeah.
So no, I don't. Well, starting from. So how it works is, yeah, from years 1 to 6 at least, we have one teacher, and yeah, then it's more structured. So what they teach, and there probably is a bit more of a plan, but in high school, it's based on kind of the courses and the range of what students are expected to learn within that course. So there is kind of a plan of what you need to teach, but how you do that is up to you.
Okay.
But it's not just like, yeah, it's not free for the teacher to just teach whatever they want. It's more of a how to teach the things that is up to them.
Clear, thank you.
Cool. All right, how do teachers in Finland evaluate students' performance? So exams and what you do in class, basically. So what I mean by not test-oriented, it's mostly that during class we don't practice for exams, but we are then tested. So for example, in a class like history, we try to study the subject that we are studying in that course as properly as we can. And then in the exams, we get, like, for example, 5 essay questions, and then we just have to answer it the best we can and argue for the points that we know, work around some things we don't know. So it's not like there's a specific wrong or right answer most of the time, but we do get evaluated through exams as well.
Arne, I want to add on, like, so basically if your argument is like persuasive or you did make a point, so you get the score, right?
You can, yeah. Obviously, if you're arguing for something completely wrong, you will lose points for that, but just by being able to argue for something can win you some points. So it's always good to try and answer even if you don't know. What kind of class we can choose in Finland? Maybe whoever asked that could elaborate a little bit. Because just, yeah, what kind of class we have?
Yeah. Please, whoever asked this, please turn on your microphone. Have an interaction, please. Who is the anonymous?
Well, all right, but we have basic subjects like most schools as well. That's, I think, the best way I can answer that without having a bit more of a understanding what you wanted to kind of know. Okay, will you discuss your choice of course selection or career with your parents? Again, very individual. Of course, you probably discussed them, but how much influence your parents?
Sorry.
How much influence your parents have on what you want to learn or what kind of career you choose? Very individual. I, of course, discussed things with my parents. So what I wanted to do with my career, or if it took me a long time to even figure it out. So I discussed it with them as well. And course selection, what I was interested in. Yeah, I discussed it, but they didn't really have any input in what I would choose. I was very free to choose whatever specialization I wanted and what interested me. Maybe someone else here in Lund can share some thoughts as well if you feel differently or similarly in some of these.
I can just share some from my experience. I'm from Sweden. And as you said, Arne, I think it's like in general, it's a lot of like what you want to do, like individually. And of course, you ask your parents and ask them for advice. But at the end of the day, it's the student that will make the decision. So yeah, it's a lot of freedom when choosing.
Yeah, thanks, Clara. So yeah, very similar.
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, maybe we can add on a little bit for the Taiwanese side. Although they are like most of the participants are from Taiwan, but I still want to like show everyone we are here. So like just as James mentioned, we are also able to choose our groups like social science group or science group, and we will discuss with our parents, but because it's like how do I say, like 3 sets, there are not much degree of freedom there. Basically, you just like very clear sets, like you cannot choose which class specifically. So I just want to add on a little bit. Okay, please move on.
And also
I think I could fill up a little bit about Gavin's point. It's like our choices are very, very, very limited because, for example, we take mathematics as a very great valuation point, because if your math sucks, you cannot choose like either science or like the third part, including the biology. So when we discuss our choices with our parents, we basically just judge from one thing, like whether you have good math or not. If you suck at math, you're unable to choose the science part because that values a lot on calculation, mathematics, or that kind of stuff. Yeah, so just add on. If anyone here from Taiwan, you have a similar or different experiences, you're welcome to share it later.
I have a question too regarding one question was how, if you scroll up a bit, how do the teachers evaluate the students' performance? And I wonder for the Taiwan system, because in Sweden we have like in high school in general that you are graded from like one exam, like one written exam, one oral exam, and maybe like one presentation or something similar. Is it like the similar thing in Taiwan, or is it just like one written big exam?
I think I'll open this question to like all the Taiwanese students here. So if you can, okay, I'll just pick one person on my screen. I have Jackie here with me. So Jackie, can you share with us like how do you get evaluated in your high school or like in your education? You're muted. I still couldn't hear you. Can anybody else?
Okay,
Yeah.
it's okay. Because I have learned in private school, so the way that teacher evaluates our performance is from just from the exam and the test. And we don't have any society or clubs in our free time because I just leave the school at 10 p.m. So leaving school in such an early time is such like a dream for me. Yes, just this.
Okay, thank you. And now I would like to invite another person from a public school. So Ian, please share with us, how do your teacher evaluate your performance at school?
Well, yes. In high schools, well, I think in most public high schools in Taiwan, exams will make up around 70% of the evaluation for each semester. And there will be 3 exams each semester, 2 midterms, and 1 final. And each midterm will be 20%, and each final will be 30%. And for the rest, the 30%, mostly it'll be homeworks, and there are some presentations for some subjects, but mostly it's still homeworks. Yeah, so but generally exams still plays the largest role in evaluation. Yeah, and also nowadays the education system is changing a bit in Taiwan, and to my knowledge that there will at least be 1 selective course in each semester in high school right now. So although compared to your scores in Northern Europe, the freedom is rather limited, but compared to the past, there's starting to be a bit more freedom to choose what you would like to learn. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing, because I think that's one of the stronger parts of the Northern educational system, that we have also a bit of creativity in our education. So if you're not like great to, I don't know, doing writing exams, you can also do a good oral exam or something else that suits you better and still get a good grade.
I wanted to add on a bit, like, I think it is a very, very fun fact. Like, my teacher back at high school, actually, he once wanted to make an attempt, like whether to evaluate students' performance based on exams or presentation. And he actually gave a poll at that time. And like majority of our students chose text exams instead of giving presentation, because they feel like when you're doing a presentation is more complicated, and you need to take a lot of time and effort for you to devote into it. So they would think like, oh, I just need to study on my own, and then I just take the test and it will be easier for me instead of making a presentation. So I think that's kind of cool, but also a reflection of that we're not very creative on our education system, like Clara said, in the Northern Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of because it's a different skill to do presentations and doing exams, and I do think there's a good balance, I'd say, in Northern Europe, that we push students to kind of get comfortable with doing presentations and public speaking and things like that, because it also requires practice, and not necessarily one or the other is more comfortable always. It just, exams are a bit more common to do, so you get comfortable with that. But obviously some people are better at doing presentations, as it's more creative and you have a lot more kind of say in what you do, and it's not just you get questions and then you answer them. But I think it's also a very valuable skill to learn in school.
Yeah, I come from France, but I'm like studying in the university here in Sweden. And I really much see the difference because in France it's similar to Taiwan a bit. It's like really exam centered. And here is like the teaching is so diverse in the way we are evaluated. Like at the moment, for instance, like I'm evaluated through like peer teaching or like correcting my classmates and doing presentations. And we also have like an essay to write. So it's like a lot of, it's not like just one exam, but a lot of little things. And it makes it like really more, I don't know, interesting, and it evaluates different capacities, I would say.
Thanks, Julia. That was great. I think we have a one for Taiwan students question. How many students are you normally in a class? Have there been periods where the system have been changed, number of students to evaluate optimal number? I think James could shed some light on it. So James, go ahead.
I think James having a.
Okay, it's fine. So how many students? Usually, like me, I'm in a public high school. There's like 30 to 40 students in a class. And will the system change the number of students to evaluate? Well, maybe no. And the number of students basically like depend on which high school you're in. It means that there's always a better high school in your region, which means you get more resources or they get like better teacher or teaching style. So people prefer to go to this school at this region. So they have to do something to get to this school. So the student number in this school or the class numbers in this school are mostly higher than the other school. So it is a public school style. So maybe private school has another answer. Like maybe Elsa, you want to answer?
Me, my experience, I have 40 students in my class, and the period change. I'm not quite sure because like when they change, I've already graduated from high school. So I'm not very sure about that, but I'm thinking probably some of our freshmen here could shed some light on us. How about Nathan? Do you have this kind of experience, like the system changed to evaluate your numbers?
Nathan,
we
you're
can't
here?
hear you.
We see you unmute yourself, but we cannot hear me. Maybe Elsa, maybe you can ask another one because I think Nathan's having a technical issue.
How about TP? Is that pronounce it right?
Yes, it's TP. Okay. I graduate at public school, and is in my class I have about 40 classmates in my class, but because I am at the science and biology sort, so the class we only have one this class in my school, but I have science. It's like science sort about for 2 class, and each class have about 35 to 40 students, and I have it's like society sort. We have 2 class, only 2 class, and in this, and each class have about 20 to 30 students. So it depends on the sorts that you joined. But well, in the period of my parents, they have almost about 50 students in a class, because it depends on the children that birth in that period, because we have few births in my graduation. So I think it's about 40 or 30 students in each class. Yes.
Okay, so I'll have Jerry to fill up a little bit for us and we'll end this question.
Okay, so for me, I have 35 people in my class, and I'm in a more society science class. And then I think we have 13 classes in total in my high school, and they're all about 30 to 40 people per class. And then how we admit students into high school. For my class, I graduated from a public school. For my school, that they will look at the exam that we took to enter high school, and then they will set a bar. So you have to have like maybe 3A, 2Bs. And then if you reach the bar, then you maybe can get in. And then, but they will have a maximum number of people that they can admit. So maybe like 500 people. So like, yeah. And then, so have there ever been period where the system has changed a number? So my understanding of this question is maybe talking about whether they change from 40 students to 20 students because they think there are too many people and the teachers cannot perform well, or they're not interacting with the students that well. And in my understanding, I don't think there has ever been a time that the Ministry of Education changed, say that a class can only have 20 people, so then it will be better performance. And then that didn't happen when I was in school. And I think it also is not a thing now, because in Taiwan, I think we just admit students into a high school and then they will sort by how many people, and then like say there are 12 classes, then it will distribute all those students into 12 classes. And I don't think they ever change the number of students to evaluate that. Yeah, so that is what I'll add on.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. I hope this answer whoever wrote this question, and we're going to look what you guys have on the pros and cons, and then we could continue our presentation. Wait, give me a second. Okay, so we'll see. So 3 equal to students, different background, and then they will have lots of free time. I agree. Arden seems to be very free. And then conducts early education, things from Taiwan, a lot of information from different subjects, and too much emphasis on academic performance. That's always true. The students are always in pressures. I could see like people are frowning from their facial expression. And then how many the pros and cons systems can develop themselves. Relatively large pressure. I think we all on the same page that Northern European students are having a more freedom on their decision, and Taiwanese students seem to have a lot of pressure. So I'll stop sharing for Slido, and we could go back to later to have other questions and discuss it later. But now, Gavin, can you continue to share the screen, and we'll be discussing about the pros and cons from each education system, from what we haven't covered and what you guys type.
Okay, thank you, Elsa. I'll be talking about pros and cons. And once again, I'm Gavin. Later, Jerry will be talking about the cons for Taiwanese aspect. So let's quickly go through it so we can have a breakout room discussion later, which I think is the important part. Okay, let's talk about the pros of Taiwanese education. Speaking of cons, you might think of a lot of cons for the Taiwanese education. So I'm trying to tell you the good side of it. So for the first one, the education is well developed and revised. So about 5 years or 10 years, the curriculum will be modified according to the latest technology. So student will have the latest information according to the discoveries in science or social science. And second one is actually the government is trying really hard, which is Ministry of Education. They're trying to turn the education system into a low pressure and with a more self-exploration system. And for the third thing, you'll be able to learn a lot of things. And not only that, you can learn apart from your countries, maybe the geology of the United States or the history or even science. Okay, let's quickly go through it. And we have the group division, which I personally think is a very good design since students could, you can say, avoid the subjects they do not like or embrace the subjects they like. Okay, the last thing, the GSAT, which is the college entrance exam in Taiwan. And as you might know, this is very important since students will rely on this to get into college. Actually, this exam has been modified several times to fit the targets of low pressure and interest-based education, even this year's GSAT. However, the effect, whether it works or not, is still under judgment. Okay, let's hand it to Jerry to talk about the cons.
Okay, so I forgot to introduce myself. Okay, my name is Jerry. I'm also from NTHU. And I'll be talking about the cons of Taiwanese education. So the first thing is that students really get a chance to explore their interests. Like we mentioned before, Taiwanese education system is very much about tests and textbooks. So what most students do is that they spend the time preparing for tests, reading their textbooks, and then that would take whole week, as we have mentioned, of the scheduling of a Taiwanese high school student. So we don't really get a chance to say, yeah, I maybe want to play basketball after school or something like that. And the second thing is that students spend most of their time on studying to get a higher score. As we have mentioned before also, that most of our evaluation is based on tests and test results. So this is probably the priority of every Taiwanese high school students, that they want to have the highest score in the class. They want to be the first in the class. And then so they will spend a lot of time, most of the time, just doing this and not anything else. And the third one is students' a lack of creativity. This is also to touch on that we focus mainly on the main subjects such as math, Chinese, and English. So we don't have a lot of time to maybe explore music or arts or anything like more of a creative subject. So students are mostly lack of creativity, but it's not like, not to say everyone is like that, but it's just the bad side that is brought by the Taiwanese education system. Okay, next page. Thank you. Okay, so this one is also to talk about a counter opinion with the Finnish education system, like Arne just mentioned. So it's the distance between students and teacher is far. So in school, we are not allowed to call the teacher by their first name. Generally, we're not allowed to. We'll call them teacher or professor. We're not just gonna say, hey, Jason, what's up? That is not something that we will do. And it's also something that is probably forbidden for us to do, just say their on a first name basis. So yeah, the distance is quite far because we're taught and we're raised to respect our teachers. So generally will not keep like distance that close to our professor. And that can be bad for students because if you're closer with a teacher, and then you feel more comfortable with a teacher, and then it's more likely that you will feel more comfortable to ask questions during classes, to ask questions after class periods, and that can be helpful to to your education. So that is a cons from the Taiwanese education. And the next one is a few students pay attention to the side subject. This is also to touch on something that I just mentioned before. So the side subject here, what we meant is like music, arts, and maybe computers. So those kind of side subject, because it's not really valued that much in high school for Taiwanese high school. So not a lot of students will pay that much attention to it. But there are still students that find, like, after attending those classes, they think this is something that they want to do, and then they will further explore on that subjects. But mainly the majority of students really pay attention to those. They pay attention to math and English that I mentioned before. And then the last one is also quite similar to the one I just talked about, is the important subjects will borrow the time from creative subjects. So it's very normal here in Taiwan to have like music class taken away because the Chinese teacher cannot finish what he needs to taught in schedule. So he will ask the music teacher to say, maybe I can borrow this class from you, and then I'll have to finish what I need to teach. So then we don't have the already very limited time for those creative subjects are now taken away, and then we don't have the time to do those again. So these are the cons of the Taiwanese education system. Yes. Yes, and from what Alice just said that Taiwanese education system is that we are not encouraged to speak during classes, but listen most of the time. This is also one of the very big cons in education, the Taiwanese educational system, I think personally, because growing up, we are told that, yeah, during class, sit there, be silent, listen to the teacher. But I don't think that is good to for studying. Yeah. So I will hand the floor to Arne to talk about the pros and cons in Northern Europe.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. So yeah, I just made some quick kind of pros and cons that are within the Northern European education system from my experiences. So yeah, I think it's to me at least a very big pro that students are given the freedom in how and kind of what they want to learn already in very early stages, as this develops you to, like, it forces you to also figure out what you're interested in. And it also teaches responsibility and independence, in that you have to be the one who is kind of making sure that you're taking classes that are of interest and of importance to you, and that you actually manage your schedule, and that this kind of, it's meaningful for you, that what you're studying in school. And at the same time, the how you learn as well. So we have this kind of concept, at least in Finland, is that in school you often learn to learn and not necessarily learn a specific subject. So you kind of get these skills of you explore different ways of learning and what suits you. So in whatever subject you do, it doesn't necessarily only help in that subject, but it gives you this skill set of how to learn anything else in life, really. And I think it's very helpful for kind of in the long run as well. So not just in this particular class, but you learn a lot of important skill sets. Then these resources in school are allocated to help struggling students. So there's a lot of guidance counseling. I know a lot of people kind of who fell a little bit behind in their course selection and didn't have enough to be on the kind of right track to graduate. And the schools are very active in kind of making a point out of it and reaching out to those students, even though it's your responsibility, but they do address this. So it's the job of, for example, counselors to check on what kind of schedules the students are having, and if there's people that are struggling with certain things. And same goes with a lot of teachers. Some subjects, at least in my high school, were very difficult for certain students, and especially some language courses. We have to learn Swedish, which a lot of students struggle with, for example, and you need to pass a certain amount of courses in that. And there were often students who did a Swedish course for the third time, for example, and then always the teacher would give some extra care in trying to get these students to pass the courses. Not by making it easy, but like giving a bit of extra attention. Then at the same time, the cons, so I think there's a little, because of this like equality thing, there's few extra simulation for students who would be high achieving, because there's not a lot of programs. This depends a bit on like where you are, at least in Finland, but not every high school, for example, has these like tracks for if you want to focus on mathematics a lot, then there might not be the resources to kind of go beyond the normal schedule of mathematics. So if you're doing very well and want to get some stimulation for, I don't know, university level courses or anything like that, that might not be available for you. Yeah, the societal pressure in at least Finland, I think Northern Europe as a whole, is not that high for you to do extremely well in class. And well, I think that also shows as less of a stressful life for students, but at the same time, some people, because of that, also don't do very well in school. And there's not that, some people don't have that pressure of getting good grades, and they just might go to school just enough to pass, for example, and then this doesn't do much for your future opportunities. Yeah, so that's kind of the flip side of the coin of not having that pressure. So it's less stressful, but at the same time, it might not be some people need that pressure probably. Yeah, those were the pros and cons from my experiences and my points of view.
Thank you, Arne. I think
we've also gotten some nice.
Sorry, I would just like to invite a few people to share about their opinions before we head into the breakout room. So I'm thinking about some students randomly from chat. So maybe Victoria, don't look down. Victoria, we'd like to add on about the Taiwanese pros and cons about the education system. Maybe you can talk about like the thing you like the most or the thing you hate the most, please. Thank you.
For Taiwanese students, for the Taiwanese education system, I think the thing I like the most is everything is really well scheduled, I think, well ordered, that we don't have to be responsible for to waste, not waste, to spend the time to allocate everything. But this is the thing that I hate the most too, that we don't have the, that is not flexible. Yeah, I think our education is really not flexible. Yeah, the schedule is fixed, and we have to stay in the school and for all day long and to chase the score, and we have to go to the cram school for just want to yeah, just to follow other steps, I think. And that's really overloading for Taiwanese students. And I think that's all.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to share? Maybe students from Northern Europe? I don't know, maybe Hitomi? Hitomi-san. Hitomi-san. どう思いますか?
Actually, I'm Japanese and I don't really know about Swedish system so far, but at least I stayed here for half year. So I feel, yeah, here Swedish education is very free because in university, for me, I only have 3 times a week classes, and each of them takes 2 hours or something. So I don't have many classes, so we have to read ourselves and prepare classes ourselves. So it's really independent system, I feel. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think this is something in the chat. Let me
We have Ruby asking question. Ruby, would you mind to like explain this question a little bit? Do you want to ask the Swedish or Northern Europe, or do you want to ask for Taiwanese students' opinion?
I think that I want to ask about the presentation about Northern Europe, because just as he mentioned, and he think that the concept of Northern Europe education is that some high achieving students are not cannot get some extra resources about what they are really doing well. So I think that so I want to ask that if they ask teachers about this, if they are available to get these resources if they ask.
Yeah, so that's depends a little bit on the teacher. Some are more inclined to help and give more projects, and also it depends on the specific high school sometimes. So at least in my hometown, we had a few high schools that were kind of focused on different things. My high school, for example, had some programs for physics students that were very kind of high achieving, that they could go on field trips, and the specific teacher who organized everything was very passionate about helping out. But then other subjects in my high school might not really work out that well. So you did what you did in school, but if you wanted to go above and beyond, that usually wasn't possible, at least with the help from the school or teachers. So you would have to find your own ways to kind of complement your studies. So something outside of school. So I'd say there is not a very general thing to have, but depending on the teacher, you might get some help.
Okay. And I want to share some phenomena in Taiwan. Just if you just say that your school is specializing some subjects, but some schools in Taiwan is like prestigious students can get more access to almost every subject. in we say good scores. So I think that's a little bit different. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Elsa, I think maybe we head on to the breakout room section.
So is everybody back or?
Everyone go back, come back.
I think everyone's back.
Okay. That would be great. So how was the discussion?
Maybe Hitomi-san, you can assign like one group and then they will talk about what they have discussed. Maybe you just call name or a group.
So we just talk about the opinion from the presentation, and we think about whether we can apply Swedish system to Taiwanese system. And there are also Malaysian students, so we can broaden our aspects from the discussion.
So here's a lot of different questions that we discussed, but I think I want to interrupt a bit. I think Ida from our group, she just brought out a very interesting question. So Ida, can you share your question with us, and then we'll hear thoughts from other people?
Of course, thank you. So we were just talking about how there's a pressure, a lot of pressure against or towards the like the younger generations today, in terms of being high achievers, doing well in school in terms of grades, and this whole success story. And looking back at Sweden, which is where I'm from, there's a lot of debates on how you can alter and change the grade system to try to combat this pressure of, obtaining the highest grades and being this golden student. But at the end of the day, we need to have the grades. That's the only way that we can assess the skills of the students currently in the Swedish system. So it's just a ongoing debate on how to ease up the pressure, whilst not exactly knowing how to do it and to achieve. So I was just thinking, considering the facts that you've shared with the Taiwanese educational system and a lot of, pressure on performing well, and there's perhaps a heavy test-oriented focus within school, how that has affected the mental health of the younger generations of today in Taiwan, considering what I can see in Sweden. It's very common.
So I'll open for volunteers to share your thoughts, but if no one, I'll just randomly pick one. Anyone want to share their thoughts on this? Typical Taiwanese classroom, we just witnessed it.
I can talk about question I. Question I have the educational opportunities, that one. So basically one of our member, Ruby, she said that most of Taiwanese thinking, or you can say that Taiwanese parents thinking, are influenced by Confucian's education. So younger generation are asked to follow the commands of their parents. So they were more likely to follow the orders instead of raising questions. So they like to listen more, ask less. Maybe that's why Elsa just mentioned that few students would raise their hand during the class. Okay, and then Alice talked about we shouldn't evaluate a student with their academic performance. Okay, I think that's everything, Elsa.
I wanted to reflect back a little bit on what Ada said. Ada said about a lot about mental health issue. I don't know if it's a sick phenomenon here in Taiwan. Is like we have a sense like if we went to the therapist or like different kind of stuff, we will be considered as weak people or like vulnerable. But this might be very stereotypical, but I think this is the one thing that we seldom go to counselor for this. But as we all know, like everybody is suffering from this kind of situation, this kind of test huge process. So we are thinking like, oh, it's an inevitable process for us to go through. So we seldom reach out to counselors for help. As you guys know, like Jerry mentioned in the previous before, like psych classes are often taken away to have major subjects test. So we have a little, very little focus on our mental health, and I don't think that's healthy, but I think that's probably some part why the Ministry of Education is trying to promoting lots different types of like little pressure education methods. I think that's probably it's the current status quo in Taiwan right now. So I'm asking if any Taiwanese students wants to fill me up in this one. Probably Ian.
Excuse me, my name is David. Maybe I can share about my knowledge about this question. When we are talking about the high-ranking high school, those students are, pursuing for the high grade and also the high ratio to study during the school. So in that sense, they may have some students, it's out of the sense. Because of the high pressure in terms of competition of the scoring points and so forth. So that kind of things about the mental health, it happened in the past, around 20 years ago or something like this. But recently, I think this kind of pressure is degrading just because of the more diversified of the sources about the student to pursue for the future. So that's why the pressure is lower and lower. But I could also see on the other way in Sweden and other countries, for example, the pressure is going high. So that's why I don't know about the social phenomenon is happening or not between different countries. But actually in Taiwan, the pressure is going down and down right now because we have more diversified ways to go for next level of the education or to for career of the professional to pursue. So that's why maybe for the IDA in Sweden, you have this kind of problem, but with Taiwan, we did not happen so often. We do happen a lot in the past, but we do not have so many in the current days right now. Yeah. Okay, that I can share about my thought about this question. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
May I raise one question to discuss about the one education system in Sweden? Because I know that most students in Sweden, especially for the university students, is free of charge to attend. So I'm just curious how about the sponsoring of the funding for the university. How could they get the money from, and where could they get the money from?
So the universities get mainly their funding, I think, from the government, so they're public universities, but also then there's foundations and other kinds of funding for specific fields, for example, or departments, but the bulk of it, I believe, comes from taxes, basically. Do you have any other specific thoughts, anyone else from Sweden that they know of?
I would say that I have the same understanding as you, that most of our the educational system is funded through taxes. So the educational system is free throughout university. So up to advanced levels, and that it's funded by the government. And regardless of if you go to a public or a private school, it's still free. And if you go to a private school, the government pays, or the municipality where you live pays an extra fee to that private school to cover your additional costs for going to a private school instead of a public school. But that's not money that you as the student or the family of that student will ever see or pay. So it's taken care of by the municipality and the government to pay for that additional cost for going to a private school. And its like center is the taxes.
Very nice, because you know that for those students who are studying in Taiwan, especially in the private university and so forth, they are almost lacking on money to attend. So that's why during the student food, they already borrowed money from bank to for them to attend the university. So that's why most of the people will spend some time to do the extra job outside of the school. So it's also affected the performance of their study in the university. So that's why we are so admired about your system, because most students were not paid money to attend. So you can more focus on your interest to go ahead. But on the other hand, for the Taiwanese students, some of them, not for NTHU students, I think, okay, some of them may manage to spend extra time to earning the money to afford them to attend the school at the university. So that's, I mean, that's a difference I will share here. So that's why we are also thinking about how to, follow this kind of system in the North Europe, and then we can have more and more students, more and more the girls and boys to attend the university, because you know that in Taiwan, the birth rate is going down, and the education, if we cannot afford to attend, then the overall educational level will be going down as well. So it will affect our competitiveness in the near future. Yeah, okay, yeah, all right, thank you. Yeah.
Okay,
thanks a lot
thank
for the
you.
comments.
Yeah, that looks really nice. And how about we have James talk about why screen.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, just tell us about what you're going to do, what you guys discussed. And wait, before that,
Okay.
we'll take a good group photo at the very end, probably end it a bit minutes later. So Clara, just wait for a little bit, okay? So
Yeah,
James,
so actually the first question we was discuss about like something about, but later it changed into like do a comparison between like some course in Taiwan, Taiwan, or I'm kind of this.
Yeah, as we had Juliet in our group, so
yeah.
We also got a point of view from France. So we were able to compare not only between Taiwan and Northern Europe, but also the education system in France. Which I found pretty interesting, yeah. And Juliet, from my preconception that philosophy and critical thinking is something important in French education. But Juliet told us that they in fact only take philosophy for one single year, which is the final year of their high school. And but they have to take a writing exam on philosophy and critical thinking to get into college in a college entrance exam. So she thinks that French students actually aren't that much prepared for such kind of critical thinking exams. which I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so and Victoria just shared about some thought about the Taiwanese education. She just mentioned like, so we're in the structure of system like the test oriented, but there are still some teachers trying to do some progress in this kind of systems. And the system is just gradually just like if they evolve, yeah. So I don't know how to end this, but like, yeah, the student is still going to like grow and evolve. So we'll maybe hand over to Elsa.
Seems like you guys have a very delightful discussion. How about Jerry? How does your discussion go?
Okay, so we mainly
do we lose Jane?
Okay, I think there's something. Jerry, I think there's something wrong with your connection.
I think so too. Wait. Is there anyone from Jerry's group?
I was also in the group with Jerry.
Okay.
Maybe I can try to share some thoughts. So we oh no. Yeah. Okay. That's disturbing.
Maybe.
Well, we talked a little bit about the how to apply, what to apply from the education systems. We found that it's a very difficult thing to kind of consider as parts of the culture is so important in yeah, so the culture is such an important factor in the education systems that it's a very difficult task to just take one factor from for example, the Swedish education system and put it in the Taiwanese system. Then we talked a little bit about the specialization process and when that happens and who helps you and what kind of work people's experiences with that. Maybe some people from our group, maybe TP or Kenneth could share what your kind of experiences were, as they were really interesting.
Sorry, you mean the thing that very interesting?
Yeah, so the how you specialized and when and what impacted you when you made the decisions and
well, the first might be my parents, because they think that if I join the science and biology group, that maybe you can become doctor or something like that. It will be a better choice or a better future for me. But yes, I do follow the advice that they told me. But when I just about a years passed, then I think, wow, that didn't work, and so I translated to the science group at third grade, and I think, wow, that's what I want, because biology is not what I good at. And my parents, and I taught this to my parents, and they say, okay, well, you can translate to science group, but you have to make a 4 on this, and if you have a good grade, well, then they will support me. And well, I do have a good grade, and they, well, just think that, wow, that work. And okay, you can keep going on, but you have to make sure that you will have the same grade and in the future. And so I think they still think about and concern about the future that you will have. So I think it's kind of a little bit of pressure for me, but I think that might make sense because if you can earn money or you can have food to eat, that there might be a big problem if you want to chase your dream. So I think the parents their suggestion might be a big reason that I choose the science group and enter NTHU this subject. Yes.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. We did have a lot of discussion. I think they're all fantastic, but unfortunately we were running out of time, so we might need to end this panel discussion. So before we let you fill the feedback form, can you guys just all turn on your camera so that we could take the group photo? Oh, wait.
So please feel free to take any screenshots if you need it.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Great, I'm great. And Gavin, can you share the feedback forms to everybody?
Sure, I'm doing right now.
I'm glad Jerry's face is back. His internet sucks. So please fill up this feedback form for us and do let us know if you have any questions.
And I also send the link in the chat box. If you don't want to scan it, you can just click the link in the chat box.
So after you guys fill in the feedback form, we'll just call it a day, and then I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for participating.